Good Monday morning, everybody. I am Angie Callan, your host of the No More Mondays podcast, where we believe you can have a thriving career and an amazing life on your terms. So what I do is bring you stories of people who can prove that fact and have great advice to help you live and work more authentically. I love communicating, which shouldn't surprise you. I'm a podcast host. I love writing. I love talking. I love recording videos. I like talking in person. I like talking virtually. I just love it all because it's another opportunity for the people lover in me to connect and learn about people and build connections. But let's be real, not everyone approaches conversation with such gusto. And that's why the world has people like Cindy Skalicky, a speaker, author, and mentor to science and tech execs. She helps people tell stories that stick. How much fun are the two of us going to have this
I don't
morning?
know, a lot.
Cindy works with leaders to help build executive communication skills, work through change, create great storytelling and communication and messaging. And it's time for us to shout into the void together. So without further ado, we're just going to get into this thing and get on our soapbox of communications together. So I hope you'll all help me welcome Cindy Skalicky to the show. Cindy, welcome to No More Mondays.
Hi, Angie. Thanks for having me. What a great introduction. That was very fun. I'm very happy to be here.
I am excited about this because before we started recording, Cindy and I were talking about how we cross paths and then realized we have like 27 paths that cross
Right.
And that we run in kind of like adjacent and similar communities, and also are both, women in Colorado, which is kind of a fun connection. Yes. And so it's that makes me more excited to have this conversation and talk about a topic that we also overlap.
Absolutely.
Storytelling and communication and authentic human connection, it just feels, not only is it something we both care about, but it just feels extremely relevant right now because we tend to be a little bit more disconnected than we realize, maybe more disconnected than ever. So what I want to talk about first is kind of maybe why that's the case and some of these misses and myths. So, particularly in the leadership space that you play, we know leaders are expected to deliver really concise messages, confident and be clear. But we also know that a lot of them don't get the training they need to do that. And there's kind of a gap there. And I'm curious why? Why is there a big gap in the expectation versus reality? Is it companies assume leaders can do it? Do they prioritize otherwise? Like, what's going on there?
Oh, I have so many things to say. Okay.
Yay.
Well, great questions, Angie. I think everyone can agree we're in a highly starved situation where attention is, so difficult to keep in our audiences. So we have to, as leaders, as people, do our best to stay in tune with one topic, one story, one person before we pick up our phones or listen to the dings that are in our world. And so attention is difficult to keep. And it's even harder now than it was before. And with the advent of so much virtual communicating happening throughout the world after 2020, that's even more difficult to keep people's attention. So, but one of the things you just said really kind of rang a bell in my brain because I work with a lot of folks who are often interviewing for higher level positions, or I know a lot of colleagues in the careers space. And one of the running jokes that we have is that at the top of every job description you'll ever read, it says this person must have excellent written and communications skills. And it is table stakes for people, but very few people actually have it in spades. So why is that? I wish I knew. I wish that everyone had to take public speaking 101 or a rhetoric class in high school like I did, or that more companies do what good companies do, which is provide ample training in how to present themselves and the brand so that we can get the buy-in that we need to run the company better and faster, because it's not happening.
And I think what's interesting is you and I also have another overlap in that you work a lot with technical people. Yep. And in the career space, I do too. And we know I am a former engineer who loves people. So I have sympathy for this, and I have the understanding of working in the environment, but I don't have the empathy for it.
Right.
Which is why they pushed me into project management early, because it was like, oh, go get the weirdo who loves talking to people in the office. But we know that that's an example, and not to pick on y'all out there who are probably listening, but it's a good example of a group that doesn't normally, if we generalize, have those natural written and verbal communication skills or interpersonal skills.
Right.
And so I think that's an interesting thing to talk about as, we come together around this idea of the lack, because it seems like especially in companies, that is a huge hole that exists in like the training or the purposeful, intentional, proactive upskilling of people rising up the ladder, right?
Well, Angie, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? You're an engineer, you are a former engineer, you are still an engineer, but you are also, compassionate and passionate about communicating and people. When I work with these teams of, scientists and researchers in academic commercialization labs, for example, or when I work with chemists or people in engineering at large companies and corporations, it's not, and I hear from the lead, like, well, we need some help. We don't have a good onboarding for communicating and presenting our ideas. Our team needs help. And I'm like, of course they do. Like, of course they're not good at this. They are highly analytical thinkers. They are in love with the lab in many cases, like to tinker, are drawn to numbers. Of course that's not of course they're not great at this.
That's why they chose this career track.
Right. And we have to add the next part, of course, which is, and let's get them to be able to share their brilliance so that their awesome ideas inside the lab get traction outside of the lab. And so we have this juxtaposition, this accidental leadership happening all over the tech companies, all over the world. And it leads and bleeds into manufacturing companies or anything that's really bent on technical innovation. We need these leaders to be able to explain to non-technical people what the value is of their idea, their innovation, so that people can greenlight it and say, yeah, let's do that. That makes a lot of sense. I get where you're going. I understand what this is going to do for our business and our customers, and I'm in.
You hit on something that really resonates and hits a very long time nerve, because as somebody who is a natural people person and loves to communicate, I observed quite a lot of interesting things when I was practicing engineering. Now I am a recovering engineer. And one of the things I noticed, and it's very validating to hear somebody say this, was that accidental leadership. And part of it is because that's the only career track that we've established in corporate America, which is if you want to grow, you have to take on people leadership, project leadership, or take over the oversight of things and people, which isn't necessarily the natural strengths of that analytical type of people, but companies don't do anything to accommodate for the accidental nature of that happening. Right. And I remember as a young engineer seeing that firsthand, because I could tell that no one knew how to lead me. Yes. They definitely didn't know how to manage me, but they didn't know how to lead me. Yes. And it felt like I was sometimes just hanging out there, blown in the wind, trying to figure out how to be activated because the ecosystem didn't support it. And what I love about your approach is you found a way to almost systematize this. So I love this concept of the machine, the well-oiled gears, and how visual that is when it comes to how to develop messaging that sticks. So tell us more about that approach.
I would love to. I learned how to say what I'm about to say after a specific instance with an engineer. So let me paint the picture a little bit. I was working with teams at NREL in their Energy I-Core lab about 5 or 6 years ago. And I'll be honest, Angie, I went into this was the first year I did it. I think I've done 4 years or so in a row of that since then, where I'm leading a session for PhDs and people who are bringing some idea out of the lab and trying to commercialize it. And I ran some little one-on-one sessions after my big session. And coming into this whole day, I admit I was not sure how it was going to go. I thought to myself, like, these people are so smart. They are brilliant at all these really technical things that I am clueless about. What in the world am I going to bring to them? Like, this is such no-brainer stuff that I'm bringing them, right? Like 25 words on a slide. This is one of my core rules for presenting slide design. But I had this pivotal moment at the end when we were moving over to the one-on-one stuff. And this particular PhD came up to me and he was just raving about the session that I had given. And I'm standing there and I'm like, this is such bread and butter stuff to me. But that's kind of the point, Angie, was like, it's not to them. And to them, my stuff is like the juicy engineering exponents and, crazy chalk on the chalkboard formulas. Like, they think my stuff was brilliant. And I know that they are brilliant. And I thought, wow, I think I'm actually meeting these engineers eye to eye in a way I didn't realize. And it was my way of realizing I am an engineer. I'm just not a chemical engineer. I'm not a physics engineer. I'm not a mechanical engineer. I'm a message engineer. And so that's kind of where I began to think about how could I explain what I do to engineers? Well, I'm a message engineer. I look deeply at the message and the messenger, and I figure out which gears are funky, broken, and sad and are not, well oiled. And I find the way quickly to unstick those gears so that the entire persuasive engine is running on all cylinders and the speaker is getting what they want from their audience after they finish presenting. So that was
there's like three things I want to point out there. Okay, one is not even about the communications conversation we're having. It's about how you identified essentially a value proposition or a strength based on your natural skill set and not what you assumed would be valuable to somebody. And I think that that's really important for anybody out there. Don't take for granted what you have to offer because someone else needs it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when for those listening and watching, you're in your zone of brilliance when the work you do seems so easy to you and other people are like hanging on your every word. That's how you know that you're brilliant at it, because newsflash, not everyone is. And I thought everybody would be at the things that I know. And the more I did it and the more I worked with groups that needed this, the more I realized, okay, actually, this is really valuable to people. And I probably could even slow it down because they were so ravenous to take it in and apply the lessons, because no one, to our point earlier, no one had taught them how to do any of this.
Yeah. And so then the second piece I love is you actually ended up applying your own framework to yourself. And that's in a way how the framework developed, right? Yes. You reverse engineered being a messaging engineer of like, okay, wait, I'm looking at this very specific audience. How do I create a mechanism or a process or an approach that's going to resonate with them? And out of it came something that sounds like it's actually your foundational approach to all of this now.
Yeah, it has become, as you can probably tell, I've memorized that, but it resonates with everybody because even non-engineers understand that an engineer is a deep dive person who gets into all the nooks and crannies and goes, to the 10th layer of the cake of detail versus just skimming, the frosting on the top. And that's just how my brain works. It goes right in and finds all the things. So
how does this look? How does a well-oiled machine look?
Great question. A well-oiled machine is able to traverse what are the five steps to message mastery. And this is something that anyone can go find at my website. There's a tab called Message Mastery at the top. And if you scroll down about a third of the way, you'll see 5 navy blue squares. And the first 3 squares from left to right are modules 1, 2, and 3. And those, Angie, are all about perfecting the message. Okay. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the 4th and 5th modules of this 5-part path are all about perfecting the messenger. that's you. And we really shouldn't do modules 4 and 5 until we've really planted and crafted beautifully modules 1, 2, and 3. So module 1 is all about understanding rhetoric and the theory behind persuasion itself, which is my master's degree and what I love to tinker in. That's the engineer part. Module 2 is our trademarked how-to model, which is becoming a book and is a podcast by a different name called Red Light, Green Light. But that's the module where people learn how to do this perfectly, beautifully, step by step. It's kind of the chocolate cookie of what we bring to the world at On Point. It's why people come to us, module 2. Module 3 is Savvy Slides. And that's like, okay, now I've got the storyline. So a well-oiled machine, Angie, has a speaker who's credible and confident. It has a storyline that flows and is relevant and is like, you can smell it throughout the whole presentation. It's not like staccato and disjointed. And it has beautiful slides that are a guide for the audience and not dripping with every other word and all these formulas and looks like, pardon me, crap, right? So once we get modules 1, 2, and 3 nicely locked and the whole message is like 85% there, maybe, now it's time to start module 4, which is rehearsing. And we developed a rehearsal trifecta to make sure people can really embody the message and stop the wheels of thinking from turning while you're speaking. And then module 5 is for people who are doing a presentation where there might be like Q&A, and that's mastering your Q&A sessions so that you can really get a grip on the impromptu part of presenting, which is the Q&A.
I have to laugh because I'm just sitting here thinking about a conversation with an engineer where you have to tell them not to have 972 scientific symbols on a slide. How's that go? But I want the data on there.
Oh, Angie, I'm still climbing this mountain. I mean, I have noticed, and this is true, there are some large companies that I work in where I try really hard working with like the middle to upper management folks when I get to the level of their slide decks, and they'll take it to their manager for approval or whatnot after I've worked with them. So I'm still ironing all this out. And they're like, oh, I have to do it this way. And I'm like, oh, okay. So who's in charge in this big whale of a ship of the slide deck stuff? Like, I need to find that Wizard of Oz and change the whole situation because that's not happening in a very functional way. So I'm still working in some cases on finding the person whose idea it is to put 974 symbols on the slide.
It's so true.
And think it's a good idea. I'm glad you're laughing. I'm crying. You're laughing.
Yeah. Visual cue, not PhD dissertation on your slide. And I think a lot of people, even that aren't engineers, tend to overstuff slides. And you and I just put a big freaking image on it. That's my MO, right?
Well, it's not your script, my friends. It's not for you. It's for your audience.
And if you give them too much to read, they're reading instead of listening.
Yeah. It is your competitor. It's become your competitor when you don't think about your audience. Your slide deck is competing with you, and this is a very bad thing.
So I think it's so important to go back to this idea of knowing, you have to know the messenger. You need to know yourself. And I like that there's kind of this like lead into establishing that foundation and then practically rehearsing and getting to know yourself at the messenger. But at the heart of messaging is who is my audience, which is why I want to linger around this rhetoric thing a little bit, because I have a feeling this is where Cindy and Angie get nerdy.
Oh, good. Let's get nerdy.
And so I want to hear a little bit. I think even fundamentally explain what rhetoric is and how it applies to this conversation about kind of executive communication and persuasion.
Sure. Well, the father of persuasion itself is the great thinker and philosopher Aristotle. Now, I'm going to nerd out a little bit, but I promise it's relevant to you. And I'll just kind of throw out the definition of rhetoric. And if all of you who are watching, driving, running, whatever you're doing, if you could just imagine an equilateral triangle for me, that's all you need to do. But Aristotle says, of the modes of persuasion furnished by the spoken word, and that means like of the ways that we can persuade with speaking, right? There are 3 kinds. The first depends on the personal character of the speaker. That's you. And that's at the top of the triangle, credibility. The second on the audience and putting them into a certain frame of mind, which is very important. And the third on the proof provided by the words of the speech itself. So if we look at the triangle, we have speaker, we have audience, we have message. It's like, well, duh, Cindy. And it's like, I know, well, we need to apply this better, everybody. So we have ethos, pathos, logos. And so anybody who's been in classical education of any sort probably knows those three terms, but that means credibility is ethos. That means for pathos, or pathos, it's heart, feeling. And as a speaker, we must get our audiences to feel something. And hopefully it's what we want them to feel about us and our message. And then that leads us to message, which is logos, meaning, okay, I got them to feel something. I got them to care about why they should invest in my startup, for example. They care because they see the value of my product. Now, once I've gotten them to care with a short story, wink, wink, now I'm going to reason with them and I'm going to get them to the logical end of why they should think about and seriously consider putting money in my hand. And so that's the convincing part. So most people do just the convincing part and they just throw data down and hope that it does all the things it needs to do to get somebody to say yes. And Angie, what I've learned in the many years I've been observing persuasive communication is that the greatest downfall of the speaker is that they over assume.
Ooh.
They assume. And we
You
all
know what
do this.
happens when we assume?
Well, they assume that the audience already knows the problem that's in the industry, that their innovation solves, that their strategic plan, if they're in a big corporation, they assume the audience already is on the same page with them about how big the problem is. And they are not. And that's why we have to start with heart and we have to start with story. And people freak out about this because they're like, Cindy, I'm not a storyteller and I don't have time to tell a story. And storytelling, isn't that like kind of reading like a novel before I get to the good part? And the answer to that is also no. Like some of the best stories I've recently helped leaders with at big companies are 90 seconds long.
And it's how we retain information. There's a reason that throughout various points of history, storytelling has been such a core part of how we communicate and pass down information. And what you nerd out on the rhetoric side of this. I nerd out on the psychology side of this because that is my missed boat.
Okay.
Behavioral economics is the thing I would have majored in had I known that was a thing 25 something years ago. And because it is, and there's nothing when we talk about, so I want to set the record straight here. Persuasion is not manipulation.
Correct. That's in my book. Thank you for giving a head nod to it.
I didn't even know,
yes,
but love it.
It is not manipulation.
Shameless plug, cued right up there.
Yeah.
But it is not. There is, and it is negotiating in a way. And we know everything in life is a negotiation from a job offer to what are we having for dinner tonight, right?
Yeah.
That's the case. And I think that where this goes into psychology and where there's like, I feel like there's like 7 things colliding here and I'm trying to figure, because this is very similar to what I talk about when I talk to those of you out there who are in my coach community and ever heard me talk through how to sell.
Mm-hmm.
This is essentially the framework, because what people usually do is go straight to the assumption that the potential client has made about their need without building the credibility to do the due diligence to meet them where they're at and actually tell them what they need and go into that advisor position from the get-go and now sell into the heart of the matter, which helps them come around to the buy-in, right? And so again, this is not manipulation. It's not icky, but people buy almost everything emotionally.
Yeah, they do. It's proven time and time again in study after study. And I will debunk a myth here for everybody.
Yay, I like debunking myths.
I'm gonna actually say this out loud, but in my book, I did a lot of research on this number. that story is 22 times more powerful than a fact. Okay, and I've said that a lot, and I have to walk it back because we did very deep research and realized it's not 22 times, it is 13 times more powerful than a fact, but it is not, in fact, 22. So I declare today that it is, and I have the resource, I have the source, I can't spit it out to you right here, but isn't that interesting? Like someone out there has led a lot of people anyway to believe that story is 22 times more powerful than a fact, when in
Irony.
fact it is 13 times more powerful than a
Which
fact,
is still substantial.
Still very powerful. Yes.
Exactly. And actually not to go there, but we'll just use time and place that we are talking right now to prove that point.
Yeah.
That what are they? What's the term? Like fact has been put into question because of persuasive, and in this case manipulative storytelling. And so that is just a current real world example to prove the 13x of how much stories relate. And I also want to clarify the fact that, like, when we're talking about, I've gotten into the selling thing, but in a way, if you're an executive trying to get your team to buy into change, to buy into a new strategy, you're selling,
you need
right?
This.
And so that word is applicable to kind of any situation where you need to use this like triangle and apply it to the way you communicate an idea, a thing, an opportunity, a product, whatever it is, in the most effective way it is received by the audience.
Right. And if we need more people to get into our boat, we need to get them in by using the levers of rhetoric. And so what do we do with this triangle? Well, you use it as a baseline. And whenever you're getting ready to present something formal or even informal through a conversation, we want to evaluate, who does the audience think that I am in terms of my credibility and my confidence? That's the speaker piece. And then, what is my message? What do I really need from them or want to tell them? And then finally, and most importantly, who is my audience? But more so, where are they in relation to my idea? And how do I meet them where they are and not where I am? One of the most harsh sounding pieces of advice I have to give frequently to clients is, I don't really care what you want to tell your audience. What is it that they need to hear from you in order to move? And those are different things usually. And it's not like I'm being crass or rude, but it's like, it doesn't matter how much detail and technical prowess you have about your ideas, and how it's not about showing people how smart you are. You are smart. We know that, but be smart enough to know that your job is to reach your audience where they're sitting, not from where your high horse, or not that people try to do that, Angie, but like, we got to meet them where they are and then bring them toward us.
And I think that's the word empathy comes to mind here. I think you have to, even if you can't directly empathize, you have to figure out how to get yourself in their shoes, right? There's your perspective, their perspective, third party perspective. And the more you can give yourself that well-rounded view, helps that idea of knowing maybe what their assumptions are.
Right.
And where that gap is, how to get them there, but also what they care about. And I think this is really important at an executive and leadership level, because if you don't truly care about what your team cares about, you ain't got no business being in that seat. Sorry.
Oh, amen. Amen. Yes. And that is why my phone rings, my proverbial phone rings, because in order to do that well, Angie, these leaders who want to sit in the seats of their audiences and figure out the best way to communicate to them, they're not very good at that, and they don't really know how to go about it. They know they need to, like, to be more in tune with their audiences, but so we have to slow people down to speed people up. That's kind of what we do. We have to slow you down so that you can not just know like the psychographics and demographics of your audience, but you need to think like they think, and you need to do better. You need to do one more than knowing your audience. You need to be them. And it's like, wait, what? How do you do that? Well, you need to get up out of your chair. And I have a whole beautiful visualization exercise in chapter 2 of my book to teach people how to do this. That's really powerful, where you literally get up in your mind's eye from the stage that you're about to speak on, and you walk all the way to the back of the room that you're about to speak to, and you sit in the back of the row, and you look up at yourself, and you start thinking about what you need to hear from yourself. So you're like Twilight Zone kind of a situation, but very powerful. Like when you're not you and you are them, you can create a killer message, but it's very hard to do that. And it requires guidance from a good coach or someone who really knows what they're doing, and time to like simmer and think through, like, okay, now that I'm them, what do they think about me, my idea? Where are they in relation to the change I want to make? And what story is going to hit them between the eyes? What story should I tell? And so we have a lot on story selection so that we don't mess that part up.
Don't be out of touch. And also, I don't know if you all noticed what Cindy did, and I don't know if Cindy knows what she just did, but she just used the 3 parts of rhetoric to make me so super excited to read her book that I wish it was on a shelf right now.
Oh, tell me. What did I do?
I'm dead serious. So what you did in about 90 seconds was build credibility around why we need to have this visualization exercise. You explained it in a way that made me emotionally connect with wanting to do it. And so now logically, I want to get the book in order to have the exercise.
Fantastic.
That's happened in real time, folks. So now is probably a good time to tell everybody about this book that is coming out, because you will be able to get it soon.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit more about it and how we can get on the wait list, and just how we stay in touch with all of you in this kind of great idea of communication and rhetoric.
Oh, thanks, Angie. This has been a really powerful conversation. The way to get on the wait list for the book or to get a pre-order and stay in touch with us is at the website page, which is onpoint-communications/book. And the book is called,
that. We'll drop it in the comments here before the show ends.
This is my fun postcard of the title and the.
Is that the cover?
This is the cover. It's called Red Light, Green Light. And it's called How Top Leaders Present with Polish, Get Buy-in, and Become More Influential. And Angie, this is all about the how-to model, which we developed and trademarked to help people get to stories that stick throughout their presentations. And so the how-to model is unpacked throughout the book. Each chapter is a letter. How-to is an acronym, and it's what you're supposed to do when you're sitting in the back row. Your audience in the back row is asking the speaker these 5 things every time they hear a presentation. Hook me, orient me, win me over, that you've got the right solution. Tell me more about this so you can engage me logically. And O is offer me a way to do something. That's the ask. So HOWTO is the 5-star path, which, by the way, sits on top of a story arc, the 5-point story arc from Gustav Freytag, who came up with that arc. Not story, but he did come up with the 5-point arc. But this book teaches you why you need to engage in heart, how to do it well, and how to get quickly and effectively to the data dump that you are going to shine in. Because people love the data stuff. They struggle big time with that first letter O. The orient me is the hardest part. So that's one of the chapters that you do not want to skip or miss. And you might need to read a couple of times to understand how to build the right storyline for your audience to get into the downward arc of the rest of the presentation. So
she just did it again, everyone. You can't help yourself. I love it so much. You're a walking example of exactly how this all looks. And I'm sitting here drawing parallels of like, okay, now I understand like why I've been able to achieve in certain places, because I'm like doing this without necessarily realizing, which, by the way, if you're good at this kind of stuff, is nice and validating, but you also might get some real tools. So I'm going to go sign up and be on the book waitlist as soon as we're done. So that's in comments. Yeah. In addition to the book, how does everybody else follow along to this, like, philosopher's style wisdom that you just oozes out of you, Cindy?
Well, I'm most I'm most present at LinkedIn, and that's where you can find me at Cindy Skalicky. I have a company page where you can get quick tips and see where we are on media, like podcasts like this, No More Mondays. I also have a podcast that just launched in early February called Red Light, Green Light. So we're always excited to share our episodes, which drop Fridays at 9 Eastern. And we are bringing you guys amazing storytellers who are in the science, tech, and innovation space and sharing their insights after more than 20, 25 years in business. And we're having really fun conversations just like this one.
I love it. I can't wait to listen and for more episodes of that to come out.
Yeah.
This is, and here's the thing. We talked about this so much in the concept of, in the context of executive and leadership and teams, but there's great pearls of wisdom throughout this that can apply to if a business, at home, with your children, with your spouse. This is the kind of stuff that I'm so grateful that you were willing to come and like get on the soapbox and stand in the echo chamber about how important it is to know how you communicate and know how you don't communicate, because stepping into the authentic way to connect with this concept is going to resonate, and it will help, build a stronger team, whether that's in your personal life or whether that's at work.
Yeah. Angie, could I give one final thought to those listening who aren't like executives and who might be more like those small business owners trying to get, their businesses forward? I would drop one thought for all of those listeners, because your ability to listen well and ask good questions will help you find out where your prospect is, for example, that you might want to sell to, or your audience of partners is. So get really good at asking the right questions and not talking so much at the beginning as listening, because that's how you're going to learn what it feels like to sit in their chair so you can solve their problem with your innovation or whatever your service, right? Your product or service. So flip the switch a little. Instead of like talking a lot at the beginning of an encounter, ask good questions first. And you can use, all kinds of LLMs to help come up with some of those examples, ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, and get some really nice open-ended questions, because people like to talk about themselves.
I want to start a whole new episode right now, Cindy, because I did not ask Cindy to come here and tell all of you that, because if you've ever been coached by me in business, there's somebody's out there rolling their eyes like, seriously, I got another one of these people who says, ask an open-ended question and listen for 22 minutes, pick up on the bites. And then you've got the actual problem versus the assumption that you can get to the heart of the matter. Because this is, you even took the words out of my mouth that I tell people all the time. We just want to be heard, and rarely do we have somebody in our life who actually listens. And as a coach or as a service provider, as a consultant, if you can be that person, you just changed the game for yourself, for your engagement, and how you're going to transform that client. And all of that goes back to this bigger picture philosophy that we've been talking about for the last 35 minutes. How's that for a mic drop?
So great. I love it. And then people love their Mondays if they can figure out how to do all these things.
You love your Mondays more. There, we tie it all in.
That's right.
If you know how to communicate well, get people to buy in, and kind of convert that, whatever that conversion needs to be, everything becomes a lot easier. And then you can live and work more authentically. How's that for just tying in every single angle here?
And then you look and feel like a bomb. Yes, it's great. Thank you so much, Angie. This was amazing.
Cindy, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody out there, thank you for listening in today. I hope you got at least one little piece of inspiration to light a fire under you. I can't imagine how you would not. Reach out to Cindy, get on the wait list for her book. Link to that is in comments. And as always, we will see you next week for another edition of No More Mondays podcast. Have a great week, everybody.